After some consideration and research into the issue, it finally occurred to me that we are already hiding the load panel every time a scene loads. So let's just apply the audio settings at this moment. It took a while for me to find where the code to turn off the load panel was, but I finally found it in the load scene script that is attached to the doors in scene 01 and scene 02. With that script open, you see the load panel property is being used as a reference to the load panel object, and in the start method the load panel is being deactivated. This is similar to what we had in the start button behavior script as well. There is no clear reason why this script would have the code to deactivate the load panel. In fact, you could imagine not having a door in some scenes, or at least in the last scene. We should move this code to a location that makes more sense and that we can more easily locate in the future. In Unity, in Scene 01, let's add an empty game object and name it Scene Controller. Select the Scene Controller and in the inspector add a new C# script with the name of Scene Controller. In the project window, move the Scene Controller script to the scripts folder. Open that script to edit it. Remove the comments and methods completely. Copy the load panel property declaration and the start method from the load scene script and paste it in the Scene Controller script. Now we want to update the volume from within the start method of the Scene Controller. We should make some changes to this as well because we had moved the control of the load panel into the game controller script. So instead of having a private game object load panel, let's make this a private game controller and call it GC, which means we will not need to set the value of load panel. And instead of setting it false this way, we will say gc.hideLoadScene. Now the code to disable the load panel is in a more logical place. In the load scene script, we will also need to have a reference to the load panel, but we want to go through the game controller as we did before. So I'll change the private game object load panel to private game controller GC. And instead of giving the load panel a value, I will give the game controller a value. And we can remove the setActive to false because we are not going to have the load scene doing that. We are going to do that in the scene controller instead. And because we don't have a reference to load panel anymore, we will use the gc.showLoadPanel method. Save this and go back to the scene controller script. Now we want to update the volume from within the start method of the scene controller. However, the update method is defined in the game controller class and it is a private method. So let's find that method in the game controller script and change the access to be public. Save this and go back to the scene controller. And now we should be able to use gc.updateVolume. I'll save this script as well and return to Unity. We have one error here. Game controller does not contain a definition for hideLoadScene. I think that is because it should be hideLoadPanel. Let's go to that line of code. Yes. Save this, come back to Unity, and the error is gone. Copy the scene controller game object, and then open Scene 02 and paste it. This will ensure that the load panel is deactivated when this scene loads as well. And now we have a scene controller script that we can add to later as our project grows. Let's go back to the splash scene to play the game. And it sounds like the volume is maybe at full volume. I'll press escape. It should be at 50%. I don't think it's starting at the level I want it at, and I am getting an error. I'm getting a null pointer reference on scene controller at line 10. Let's look at that. So GC has no value, and I didn't put a value for it. I created the property and again forgot to put the value. So let's do that. Save this, come back to Unity, stop, and restart the game. When I press start, I already hear that the volume is lower, which is good. If I press escape, go to the audio, bring it back up, Press escape again. See, that is a much louder audio now. So that's great. That means that the audio is being set from whatever we put inside the code as the initial values. And if I press escape, let's bring the background down really low and mute the sound effects and go back into the game. I can't hear myself running around. Press escape again. The background audio is probably still there. It's really just too quiet. I'll go to about 50%. Yes, I can still hear that rainy kind of sound, but there's no footsteps. If I come into the scene 2 and then I leave scene 2, those volume settings stayed the same. Wonderful. I'm going to press escape and stop. For development purposes, it would be a pain to always have to test from the splash scene, which is where the game controller is instantiated, and have to play from the beginning to get to the scene you are working on. In fact, that would be crazy. One solution to this is to find the Start button and open the Start button behavior script that is attached to it, and just change the scene that is being loaded. For instance, if we are working on scene 2, we can set that here, save this. Now when I press play and press start, we are in scene 2. Stop this and go back to the code. I'll switch this back to scene 1 because that would be the scene I would be working on next maybe. Using the Don't Destroy on Load is only one of a few different methods Unity provides for passing information between scenes. But this method has the added benefit of allowing us to keep entire game objects while loading new scenes. While it may have felt like quite a bit of work to set up, most of the work will save you a great amount of time as you build more and more scenes.